fiscal cliff is simply first of all, an expiry of a range of tax cuts, and secondly, across the board, indiscriminate, about 2% cut in government expenditure across a whole range of different portfolios. I think they've excluded defence is almost always the case, but 2% cuts in funding for all departments if the particular law isn't overturned, and it reflects the previous impasse under the previous electoral arrangement. And because they couldn't reach a compromise about what they call the debt ceiling, which was the maximum level that government debt was allowed to get to, then Congress passed a motion that meant that if they didn't have a organised way to reduce government debt within a year's time, then at that point an automatic 2% cut would be applied across all portfolios. And that would be a bit like instantly trying to turn America into Greece, from my point of view. It's an insane idea. But if you have the usual level of political logjam that applies in Washington, it'll happen because both parties will fail to reach an agreement and what sits on the statute books will come into effect. I have to go back to saying where does the crisis come from to begin with? And we have a financial crisis caused by excessive levels of private debt. So a huge private debt bubble which has been going on in America really pretty much at the end of the Second World War, but distinctly as a rate of growth of private debt exceeding the rate of growth of the economy, becoming serious from the mid-1980s on. So you had private debt beginning at 45% of GDP back in 1945 and reaching 303% in 2009. Now it's declining, both through foreclosures, wiping out a large part of household debt, the financial sector deliberately paying its debt down. So you've fallen from about 300% of GDP to 250% of GDP. Now, the reason this has led to an economic crisis is that total spending in an economy is the sum of income plus change in debt. But what that means is when you've got private debt rising, expenditure exceeds incomes. So it gives you that's this recipe for a booming economy. When you have debt being paid down, expenditure is less than income, and that gives you a depressed economy. So you've got people actually taking money out of circulation by paying the debt down. You're reducing the amount of money in the economy and reducing demand at the same time, hence the slump America's been in since 2008. Now, when that happens, because when private sector spending falls, normally government net spending rises because, for a start, the tax revenues fall and their welfare payments rise. So government spending tends to go in the opposite direction. So the increase in government debt has been a response to a turnaround from rising private debt boosting demand to declining private debt undercutting demand. So it's a bit like my best analogy is always an air conditioning system. If you have a room which is freezing, then the air conditioner comes on to warm it up. And that's effectively the government spending role in that system. Now what they're suggesting is the room's freezing and let's drop the temperature. Okay? Let's take more money out of the system than the private sector's removing by also removing government money from the system. So what actually you do, you reduce the amount of money in circulation and reduce the level of aggregate demand. And that is supposed to be the solution to a problem where there's not enough aggregate demand. Okay? So it's easy to make the mistake of believing that's sensible because people extrapolate forward the idea about a household budget. And if you're spending more than you earn as a household, you've got to cut back on your spending, and we all, fall for that sort of reasoning. When you apply it at the household level, if you cut back on your spending, it doesn't mean you lose your job. Okay? But if you do it at a national level, if you have the entire society trying to reduce the rate of turnover of money and reduce the amount of money in circulation, it will reduce the number of jobs as well. So it's the wrong policy because it's focusing on the wrong type of debt. It's trying to reduce public debt when the real problem is caused by too much private debt. And it would be imposing austerity in the belief austerity will cause growth. Now, the best example I can give of how successful that policy is Greece, followed closely by Spain, with England not too far behind. Well, a long way behind, actually, but yeah. Surely now, looking at those examples, you can say those are countries that have tried austerity and tried cutting government spending. What a fantastic success it was.